Hi, this is Al Adamsen, founder and executive director of the Talent Strategy Institute, and I'm very excited today to be here with Greg Newman of Trustsphere. Greg, you there?
Hey, Al. Yep, I'm here.
Hey, thanks for again spending time to share insights into the Trustsphere tool and the value proposition you have around leadership assessment and this leadership scorecard concept that you all developed. So before we dive into that and look at some views of your product, can you just share a little bit about yourself and what attracted you to Trustsphere?
Sure, yeah. I joined Trustsphere about 3 years ago now. Prior to that, I spent 15 years traveling the world and building global HR systems with SAP. So what I learned from that was that a lot of HR technology is doing what's easy rather than what's really important. So a lot of companies spending a lot of money on that core technology around HR and master data recording. But the much harder strategic stuff is much harder to implement because the processes around it are much harder to set up, and especially when you're going to globalize to agree and to standardize. So I joined Trustsphere because I'm really interested in being part of a change in HR and the data that HR consumes, because I think we need really fresh data to get fresh views of the organization. So why I joined Trustsphere is this ability to understand what people are doing at work, how they're getting their work done, and all of that really soft side of an organization that's previously been invisible.
Yeah, and I would equate soft with hard insofar as it's not easy, and it's oftentimes this soft moniker belittles both the effort involved and the value that can be reaped from doing this work well. Before I let you go further, you all are firmly in the organizational network analysis space. Can you define that for listeners? And I know you started to already when you talked about the value of Trustsphere, but I'm just really curious on your specific definition given your perspective.
Yeah, for us, organizational network analytics is another form of analytics, right? So it's another way of processing data to provide rich insights. And what we're looking at is the networks of relationships that we build at work that enable us to collaborate, to influence, to share expertise, to be a mentor or receive mentorship. All of those things are very human activities done through very human relationships. And organizational network analytics for us is a tool that enables us to uncover all of these hidden relationships that are really the glue that holds an organization together.
Outstanding. So how about we jump into what you have in store for us?
Cool. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about a specific piece of work we're doing with some customers at the moment around measuring the impact of leadership development programs. But I think before I jump into the outputs, to the analytics, I thought it might be good to just explain how we view the world and therefore the types of data that our customers are getting access to. As I mentioned earlier, the traditional HR technology focus and the traditional HR focus has been on what we would call human capital. So that very static set of skills and experience and qualifications that I bring when I start a job. So how long have I been in the industry? What's my paper qualification? What are my skills? What are my expertise? Even what's my age and my gender. That's all the data that your traditional human capital management system brings to work, and that's really important. There's my knowledge and my experience is the strong part of my skill set, but what we're interested in is the second part of all of us as humans, which is what is the network of relationships we build at work, because very little of our work nowadays is done in isolation. Very little of what we create at work is done based on what our qualifications or experience gave us. It's who do I reach out to, who do I talk to, who do I gather insights through. That network is what we're trying to measure with organizational network analytics to measure social capital.
Fantastic.
And the way a good way to understand what we're doing at work is we are building a set of networks constantly. And we're only talking here about work networks. So the general idea of social networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, that kind of thing, we don't touch. We're interested in corporate networks that we create within our enterprise, within the place that we work. So the research shows, for example, that we build about 6 different networks. The first 2 are what we would traditionally think of as social. People we know, people we have worked with previously, people we see every day. They're the people in our daily and our wider social network. The next one is those wise old owls or wise young owls in the organization that we go to for advice. What do I do with my career? Where do I take this? Who's the sort of person that can help me solve this problem? And we might be either going for mentorship advice, or we might be the one imparting that advice. So we have a network of mentors in the organization that help us out. The 3 networks that we're focused on at Trustsphere is the set of people that we innovate with. So even without realizing it, there's a set of people we know who are receptive to new ideas, who are able to support us if we've got a crazy hunch. So those are the people in our innovation network. Slightly different is the expert network. So they're the people, like I go to my marketing person because I know she is a center of marketing expertise and I know nothing about it. So I will go to her to say, how do we do social? How do we do that kind of thing? So we have a group of people who we know can impart knowledge and wisdom to us. And then the most frequently active network is this work network. So that's the people that we are interacting with almost constantly as we create stuff, as we change stuff, as we deliver stuff. And these networks apply to us no matter what business we're in. If we're in construction, if we're in IT, if we're working in a supermarket, we're still building all of these networks. And so what Trustsphere is doing, because there's a consistent set of signals delivered through electronic communication, is measuring that innovation expertise and work networks for organizations.
Excellent. And if I understand this correctly, you are measuring, for lack of a better term, activity or behavioral data. In other words, what people actually do, not what they think they do, or is it a little bit of both?
No, that's right. So the traditional approach to organizational network analytics has always been surveying people to ask them. And one really good description I heard of survey is, a survey is the fastest way to collect a set of historical biases, right? So a survey is going to tell you what I was thinking and who I was thinking it about, and it's going to have all of that flavors and biases built into it. So it's not a bad approach. It's hard to keep going with surveys because survey fatigue kicks in pretty quickly. So what we've done as a technology developer is to work out how we can approximate that type of understanding based on electronic data that's already in the organization. So in a few slides, I'll show you how we gather our data and how we accumulate it.
Sounds good.
So here's an example of the type of visualization we provide for an organization. So this is actually us collaborating with one of our big partners. So it shows over 3 years the growth of network between about 13 people at our company and about 200 people in our partner company. And that's us developing a product and going out to market together. And the different thickness of the lines here represents the different volumes of communication. And you can see as the network grows, some people are very central to the network, some people are out on the periphery. So we're seeing there how people are really collaborating to work together. So why we think social capital is important is, you can imagine this could be my network at work. So where are my relationships spread across the different networks that I've built in an organization? And as you can imagine, this changes almost constantly as I form new relationships. Some relationships drop away, but this is the set of people that I'm leveraging and I'm collaborating with to get my job done. And this becomes really important, for example, when someone's a leader, because we need to see what sort of network they're bringing to their role as a network, as a leader, and how they're using that to support their team and help their team get their jobs done. So some interesting insights that we know about these networks we build is a lot of people, over time in their career, build out a large expertise network. And the science shows that if you're regarded as an expert, that you'll probably be very well paid. But the downside of it is that you'll never leave your team, because once your manager establishes you as the expert, they're not going to let you go and work for anyone else. And then in larger organizations, the curse of expertise means that those people who have built up and accumulated all of this expertise are very unlikely to encourage innovation, because innovation in its natural way disrupts the value of all of this expertise. So organizations that are full of experts often find it really hard to innovate. That's why we see a lot of organizations pulling their innovation labs outside of their corporate offices, because they don't want to be saddled with that history and that expertise that would pretty normally make it hard to create an innovative environment.
Absolutely.
And when we think about the larger network that we build, people with really large, broad networks are awesome at supporting change and information sharing, but they also create the greatest risk for an organization, because when they disappear, their network walks out the door with them. Those relationships are gone. And research shows they take 3 to 5 years to replicate all of those relationships. So when we start thinking about this view, it helps us understand why this is so important.
And Greg, a question for you. If I understand correctly, this visualization would give an individual or team leader visibility into where he or she may be lacking and where he or she thus might want to nurture more relationships to achieve a certain outcome like innovation. Is that a fair statement?
That's exactly it. So you imagine, and I'll show you in a few slides, that as part of a leadership development course, we're trying to help someone understand what type of leader they want to be. And so if I say, yeah, I want to be that guy for innovation, then this is the first time a lot of people are seeing how big their network of other innovators is in the organization. So over the course of the leadership program, these people are being taught how to innovate, but also how to foster that network of innovation that's going to enable them to deliver on this stuff.
Got it.
And just a sort of aside on this is that the social capital view of things like leadership and things like high potential very much shows there's a really high correlation between people who are at that top corner on your 9-box grid also have very unique social capital in the organization. So those leadership behaviors or those hypo behaviors about how large is your network, how much of the organization do you have relationships with, or what we call reach, how central to the network of the organization are you, how many people come through you for conversations, and how collaborative are you. All of these are really strong indicators of people who are developing leadership skills, and we can see them change and develop over the program.
Got it. And just to understand it, because I imagine this would be a question most would have, would that work in conjunction with a competency model or a leadership training program, or would that work instead of, or how would that work together with a competency model?
So if you think about us as an MRI, right, we are a very specific set of measurement, a set of analytics that is understanding behaviors. So we're not going to tell you whether they're good behaviors or bad behaviors. We're just going to say, based on your individual network, your external network, your internal network, this is where you sit compared to other leaders, compared to the rest of the organization. And you can imagine building up those competencies, changing those behaviors, developing yourself as a leader are all actions that you take, and we can measure the impact of those actions over time.
Got it.
So just to fill in the blanks here on what we're doing, we're taking at the bottom a whole lot of individual corporate data sources that we use, like email, instant message, and telephone data, either accessed in Flow or from archives, and we're using the traces of all of those conversations to build up a social graph of an organization. And then we're pushing that out to a whole lot of either our own products, like we'll see today, or to a whole lot of partner technologies. So if you imagine the customer that I'm talking about today, they have over 100,000 employees, but we are just graphing about 250 of them for this leadership program. So we're turning on a set of connectors, gathering a set of data over 6 months, and then turning it off. So we're just getting, of that whole massive network, we're just getting the little view that we need to understand the impact of their leadership training.
I like it.
So a key thing, only one more thing, and then I'll show you the good stuff, is that we are also measuring the strength of relationships that we have across the network. So that chart on the right is showing, the red and blue shows the coloring shows the recency of interactions. So we're looking there to see what are your hottest interactions, but we're also using another set of stuff about how do you interact with these people to establish the strength of your relationship. So how long have you been interacting? How equal are your interactions? What's the volume of your communications? Also, what's the speed of response? So how quickly does someone respond to your emails? How quickly do you respond to the emails? Then we use some other bits that we pick up from the metadata that we process to say, are you having meetings together? Are you in the CC or the to of an email? A whole lot of other stuff like that to establish how strong a relationship is that everyone has in the network. And as I sort of hinted there, we only process metadata. So we don't access the body of emails or instant message or telephone calls. We don't listen to what you're talking about. We don't even access that part of the server. So we just take transaction log files to build up a pattern of forward and back communications, and that's the source we're using. So we're trying to balance privacy with business value here. We don't find a business need to know what you're talking about, but we can see a business benefit in understanding who you're talking to.
Yeah, agreed. And it also, begs the question, if I am one of these people whose data is getting collected in this way, and I'm aware of it and I see these outputs, it is going to arguably affect my behavior one way or another. I'm either going to retreat or I'm going to engage in it more to, again, nurture a relationship that could potentially provide more value. Is that what you're seeing? Is there an element of the Hawthorne effect here where people might adjust behaviors either consciously or subconsciously?
Totally, yeah. So the Hawthorne effect kicks in straight away from day one. So there's no doubt there. But the key thing, one of the most important variables we're picking up is this relationship strength, right? So what we're looking for is a two-way relationship between human beings. So even if once I know that the Trustsphere technology is turned on, the next day I could send an all-staff email and try and establish that I have a massive network around the world. Unless everyone replies to that email, we're just going to see a spam signal, right? We're not going to see quality relationships growing over time. So it's very hard to beat the system, but I'm also quite realistic that what we've got is just one signal of a network, right? For the first time, we are revealing to people what their network is in the organization in a quantified view. We're not saying that we've got every relationship. We're not saying that this is 100% accurate, but we are saying here is a really constant signal. Everyone in the organization is being put through the same view and the same process. You will know people that you don't email. You will know people you don't instant message or telephone. Add them into this. Mentally, don't let them drop off. But here is a good, reasonably accurate view of your network that's constantly changing and up to date.
Got it.
So let me show you some slides. Hang on a moment. Let me just. So what we're doing with this customer is they're on a 6-month leadership development program. All of the usual things that you would expect in this program. They're being trained. They're having coaching. They're having mentorship. It's a 6-month program. So what we did is we established a baseline of their network and activity at the start of the program. And then what we're looking at here is an anonymized view of this data showing what it's like after the first 2 months. So you can see there, first 1 month, sorry. So what we're looking at is how much this person's relationships and networks have changed over this time. So we've got an individual summary of me as a leader. We've also got one on my team, because we know leadership impacts team behavior. So we want to see if the team changes their behavior. And then we have a set of visualizations to show the network of all of the participants. So this first one is showing where is my network. So this employee X has 158 strong relationships internally and 7 externally. So they're well above the average of the people on the course. And we also know they're well above the average employee from across all our customers. The average employee across all our customers has less than 100 relationships in total. So these people have already exceeded that. We can see that they're very collaborative, that they're very involved, but also that their networks are unusually internally focused. And as this goes over the periods of the course, we'll see this change. So we'll start to see the delta emerge. So that's just a simple visualization of their strongest relationships.
Understood.
Then we start to say, okay, that is your network, but where is it spread? So these are a set of relationships across different parts of the business. So we can see this person has 12 different business units that they're working with across the business, which is again above the average for people on the course who only have relationships in 10 different departments. And we can see there the spread of that, the number of relationships they have with different parts of the organization. The next thing we see is, of these relationships, how are they spread across the hierarchy? Because what we know is that for an innovative relationship, you need to have a set of relationships above you who can support innovation, but you also need a large set of relationships below you that can deliver that innovation. So what we're measuring here is how many relationships do you have up the hierarchy and how many do you have down below the hierarchy?
That's interesting. Is there some leading practice where there should be some equity there between up and down, or in favor of one or the other, or does it depend?
Yeah, so, and this is where, you know, our angle as an MRI provider, right? We are a software vendor in this process. We're definitely not a company doing leadership development. So we work with really smart people from consulting companies who deliver this type of thing, and they're tailoring this based on the organization, based on the industry, based on the focus of the team. So I couldn't say there's a golden rule. And even we see big cultural differences. Different parts of the world have a very different attitude to how many levels up the organization can you skip, what's acceptable, who can you reach out to.
Yeah, I could see there where that would be true. Yeah, thanks for that.
No worries. And then on a little more transactional level, what we know is that the more a manager communicates with their team, the more that team communicates internally. So this is some simple statistics on the amount of interaction the leader has with their manager up the hierarchy and the amount of communication they have down into their own team. So we're just looking there to say people know when, and think of all of these things as not broadcasts, but relationships, right? So the more I talk forward and back with my manager, the more I'm going to know what's going on. If my manager just spams me with continual updates and I never reply, that's not the same as forward and back communications, and it has a different value.
And just to highlight this, and this is something I'm finding very appealing, is that you're measuring what actually happens in terms of frequency, and not some arbitrary uh, assessment of what's good and bad. It's just this is how often it happened over the period, and then it's up to those analyzing the information to determine whether or not it can be improved upon, or if it's an optimal level, or if it's maybe even beyond what it needs to be. Is that a fair set of statements?
That's right. So this and this stuff is a balance, right? So for this manager, we don't even know if in their coaching session this is one of the areas that they're focused on, right? So this is still a fairly generic set of insights, and their mentor and their coach through the program are saying, right, for this period of time, let's focus on increasing communications with your team, or possibly something like creating a more autonomous team. So maybe you should be cutting down on communications with your manager, making more of the decisions yourself. So we don't get a view on this. Again, we're just trying to be this MRI to say this is the reality of what's happening. And this is if your behavior is even changing at all. Or are you just turning up on this course, saying all the right things and going back to your old habits?
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
So, so the interruptions at work one is slightly different, because we know that the less you are interrupted at work, the more quality outputs you produce. So what we're tracking here, one of the signals we get from email is how often you get interrupted. How often do you send emails? So we can see this employee is sending about 2.5 emails an hour. So the data shows every time you stop work to send someone an email, you lose about 20 minutes of productivity, 10 minutes to write the email, 10 minutes to pick up where you were. So what these teams are focused on is trying to reduce the amount of interruption so they can focus on the really important tasks that they have for the business and they're part of the organization.
Love it.
So we also do some cool stuff around predicting employee burnout. And one of the predictors that we have for employee burnout is how much of your email activity is outside working hours. So we can see this manager, for example, has about 300 emails over a month that were sent outside their working hours. So that's outside, in this case, 9 to 5. So that's 50% more than the average, but we also see that their overall email activity is also much larger than their average team member. So this isn't always a bad thing, but we know if we see whole teams and whole departments where only a few members are consistently doing this, that this can be one of the indicators of burnout.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and not only a burnout, correct me if I'm wrong, it could also be a determinant of whether a team is under-resourced. Therefore, this team has to put in longer hours and do more activity to get the work done. Is that how it can be utilized as well?
Yeah, so that's one of the pieces we've got coming up, is to look at how much a team is interacting and communicating compared to other equivalent parts of the business. And one of the things we're trying to establish there is, are they under-resourced? Are they under-stretched? Because I think, that's a really good predictor of overwork, things like over-collaboration, overwork, that type of thing.
Excellent. Agreed.
This is just the end of the individual chart. So some raw numbers there on network size, strong relationships, because strong relationships are much more important than just mere connections, relationships up and down the hierarchy, relationships across different business units, and then how they're interacting with their team. So that's the leader's view. We then aggregate that to look at their team that they're leading, right? So we see a really big drop if we look at, just give you some numbers if we roll back to the start. So this manager had 158 strong relationships and 7. If we look at their team on average has 120 relationships. So we're already seeing that their team has less relationships than their manager, but this team is still over double that of an average team. So this is the average employee's number of strong internal relationships in that manager's team. So again, we're trying to understand what is the manager's role as a gatekeeper here. So does the manager manage a large external network, keep their team controlled and isolated, and regulate that interaction with the rest of the business? Or do they create an autonomous environment where their team can interact with the rest of the organization? And again, different parts of the organization, different things are appropriate and different things are right.
Got it.
Then we look to see in a similar lens, what is the interactions that the manager's team has with the rest of the business? What parts of the team organization are they collaborating with the most? Where are they spending their effort? And again, just a comparison to average. And then what we call skip level relationships. So this is the hierarchy of the organization from the bottom to the top. So we're looking to see how many relationships the team has with each member of that hierarchy, and then comparing that to the average. So we can see this team has a lot more relationships. They're a lot more open than the average team in this program.
Interesting.
Then we start to see how they are building relationships internally. So we're measuring all of the email interactions of the people in this team, and we can see the average employee has strong relationships with 48% of their team, so about 50% of their team. So the cool thing is that everyone says collaboration is a real priority, but we also know that if you have too many strong relationships, too many sets of ongoing conversations, that actually hampers productivity. So this 50%, so having strong relationships with about 50% of your team is about right. You wouldn't want to have many more because then you start to spend all your time collaborating and you don't have any time to get work done.
Got it. And in that regard, are you measuring, or can you measure the length of a particular correspondence? I know you're not looking at the content per se, but a 2-sentence email is different than a 5-paragraph email. Is that something that is a data point for you, or are all emails weighted the same?
Yeah, so we don't have visibility on the length of an email, but we do get the size of an email.
Okay.
So we use broad strokes on that to say that this is likely to be one with an attachment, and this is likely to be one that just contains text. So again, we're trying to balance that privacy aspect of it, but yeah, we can start to see where large emails are getting sent forward and back. But again, that could just be a conversation that's been forward and backing for 6 months. Doesn't naturally mean that it's got an attachment in it.
Got it.
I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and talk as fast as I can. We're looking at the next one, similar to the manager. How often does the team break from their flow of work to send an email out? And I think the next one starts to show where leaders and their teams really differ. So when we saw the amount of outside work hours that the manager was sending, it was about 10% of their traffic was sent outside working hours. When we look at the team, we can see even though this team sends a lot of email compared to the average team, still the proportion of that that's getting sent outside working hours is very, very low. So on the next set of analysis for this customer, we're going to look to see, is the manager sending emails that no one responds to? And if they don't, one of the things the business wants to say is, well, manager, unless this is significantly reducing your stress levels, why don't you stop sending those emails at night, because none of your team are picking them up? Or maybe the flip side will be true, that they'll say actually they want their team to start picking these emails up outside working hours. But this is kind of data on the behavior that we've never really had access to.
Got it. Like it. It's cool stuff.
And then the final one we do here for the team is how much of a controller of the ecosystem are you? So in this case, we can see the manager has a set of strong relationships with their team, but the team also has a good level of interaction with the rest of the ecosystem. So we see some managers who are very tight gatekeepers, who really lock down the flow with the rest of the organization. But this one has what we would call a democratized leader role, where they're not worried about their team interacting externally. They try and balance that a little bit and try and supply value by regulating that flow. But the flow of information is sometimes directly through the manager and sometimes straight out to the rest of the ecosystem. And then the last one we have there is just some overall statistics on their team's numbers, and we'll watch those change over the course of the program.
Got it. And yeah, as this evolves over time, are there hypotheses that are being tested or goals that are being put forth at the outset, or is this pretty much a blank slate when it's started? I know you had those benchmarks at the outset, but there's, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no precedent for that visibility. Therefore, it's hard to assess a good, bad, or otherwise assessment against it. Is that true?
That's true, and it's definitely true at the point we are now, right? So I can see us getting to a point when we have enough customers and enough role and location specific information that we can start establishing benchmarks. We have a lot of projects going on where we're combining this stuff with engagement data, with performance data, with attrition data, because to look at this through the single lens of the social capital is probably not enough to be deterministic. But you can imagine the leader of a sales team, we could quickly get access to sales team performance, revenue numbers, team attrition, and start to see a correlation between the way the manager works as a democratized leader or not, and the turnover in their team, or whether they're hitting their targets or not.
So as we start to wrap up here, help me understand this on behalf of those who'd be listening. So organizational network analysis or organizational network analytics has generated a lot of enthusiasm, particularly over the last couple of years with the emergence of tools like Trustsphere. And I, as you know, having known me, am a very strong advocate for being creative with the data that we are using for analytical purposes, because historically we've been content just looking at the core HRIS and trying to make magic out of data that has been often inappropriate to answer the questions leaders want to know. So with that in mind, is this something that you would elevate as a priority for heads of talent, for CHROs, and those simply interested in driving innovation or higher productivity in their organization? I imagine yes, because you're with Trustsphere, but yeah, why should it be elevated up the priority list for most organizations?
So you won't be surprised to know my answer is definitely yes. So having built global HR systems over a long period of time, with some of the customers I've worked with, we were at a point where there was only 3 employee master data updates being made per person per year. So what HR was managing, and managing very well, was a completely static set of HR data, which meant if you do an attrition model at the start of the year and rerun that model at the start of the year, only 3 of the variables in the model have changed, right?
Yep.
So what the business needs, and if you imagined a marketing team whose data only changed that often, they would be frozen because they wouldn't know what to do next. So I think HR needs to recognize our traditional set of human capital, individual viewed data is good. It's good for reporting. It's good for knowing how many employees we have in the organization, but for predicting the behavior of our talent, for identifying stars in the organization, for predicting employee burnout, for trying to control attrition or make good retention decisions, we need to have a set of data that is constantly changing to represent the wellness, the engagement, the performance of all of the employees that we manage data for.
Well, you're selling me, Greg. Not that I needed to be sold, but yeah, it's a very appealing story, and congratulations to you and the work that you and the Trustsphere team have done over the last several years. And yeah, as we start to close, any comments and words of advice for those who'd be listening?
No, we have a great base of customers now around the world who are asking us some really interesting questions. And the golden rule at Trustsphere is we like working with smart people. So we have people reaching out to us almost constantly now with ideas and hypotheses and things that they're interested to understand based on visibility of their network of their organization. So we don't think there are many bad ideas out there. So we're always excited to talk to people, try new things, run some experiments, and see if we can find something new, something valuable hidden in the data that's already in the organization.
Excellent. And how can people get in touch with you?
You can visit us at trustsphere.com, or I'm always there on email, greg.newman@trustsphere.com. But yeah, reach out to us. As I said, we love talking to smart people.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Greg, super appreciate it, and wishing you and the team all the best.
Thanks very much, Al.
Yeah. Cheers.